Hello, this is Joe Orlando, president of PSA and longtime hobbyist. Today we are going to discuss the PSA card grading standards, including grading tips. Within the general guidelines, it is crucial that collectors understand the importance of context since there are so many condition-related variables that come into play. In other words, reading the grading standards or identifying defects on a trading card is one thing, but how you interpret those defects is the key to understanding how the graders evaluate the cards. Let's take a closer look at how the system works using various examples of some of your favorite cards, including the classic 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle. The PSA grading scale is a general guide, but even if two cards receive the same grade, they are not necessarily identical. For example, a card may be graded a PSA 6 for a variety of different reasons. All of the following cards are graded PSA 6, but once again, for different reasons. Let's take a closer look at this 1933 Gaudy Babe Ruth number 149. If we enhance the upper left portion of the card, you can see the slight bend in the Babe Ruth card. In addition, you might also notice general wear on all four corners. This is a pretty typical looking PSA 6. How about this 1954 Topps Hank Aaron rookie card? You might first notice the rather low centering top to bottom. In addition to that, like the Ruth, you might also notice general wear throughout the corners of the card. Here's a 1955 Topps Roberto Clemente rookie. The first thing you might notice here, especially upon magnification, is the existence of print lines or print defects through the facial region of Clemente. Remember that eye appeal is a key factor in the grading process, and print defects certainly play a role and can impact that eye appeal. Here's a more modern example, a 1986 Fleer Michael Jordan rookie card. Now, due to the colored borders, you could really see the chipping and the wear along the edges and the corners of the Jordan card, which ultimately resulted in a PSA 6 grade. Remember that context is a major consideration. A card from 1948 versus a card from 1989, for example, has different criteria to examine. There are printing differences, card stock differences, and so on. Here are two great examples, a 1948 Leaf Bob Feller and a 1989 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. rookie. Now, the first thing you might notice on the Feller is that sort of unfocused or blurry look in the facial region of Feller, but that's how the card was made. So it's very important when you approach the grading process that you have that knowledge handy before you render a grade. You can clearly see that on the 89 Upper Deck Griffey, that those registration problems, the card stock, just the general appearance of the card is completely different than the Feller. Also, keep in mind and remember the grading room environment. There are things such as unique lighting, a darkened room, and the key here is you want to illuminate the cards properly as you evaluate them. The more consistent your grading room environment is, the more consistent your grading results can be. Also remember that tools help, but don't overdo it. So what do we mean by that? Where our graders here at PSA use from a 7-power to a 10-power loop or magnifier when evaluating cards. In addition to that, they also use a 50-watt halogen bulb on their desk lamps, in addition to black lights in case they are looking for things like recoloring or other alterations that may be present on a card. The key here is to not overdo it. If you use too strong of a magnifier, if you use too bright of a light, it can actually blind you to the defects on the card. It'll make it very difficult to pick up the subtle defects that exist on the paper. One other thing I might suggest is buying graded cards, or at least to view lots of graded cards before you submit yourself. Familiarize yourself with the appearance of various grades, and you can do this by viewing lots at an auction, going to a trade show, or your local baseball card shop. There is no substitute for experience. Let's take a look at the PSA grading scale using PhotoGrade. So our card example, the classic 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle. Now keep in mind, the further you go down the grading scale, the greater the variation in card appearance. Let's start at the top, PSA Gem Mint 10. Now keep in mind that a PSA Gem Mint 10 doesn't literally have to be perfect, but it does have to be virtually perfect. This Mantle card happens to be a population of 3, but this particular example is widely considered to be the finest example of the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle. It is virtual perfection. Now let's take a look at a PSA Mint 9. So for those of you new to the grading process, you're probably wondering, what's the difference between a Mint 9 and a Gem Mint 10? Aren't they both mint cards? Well, yes, they are. But usually what separates a 10 from a 9 or vice versa are eye appeal issues. So when we enhance this image here and take a look at the bottom right, the centering as a result of a tilt is lesser than and not quite as good as the Gem Mint 10. It also isn't quite as vibrant. There's also a very slight print defect in the background. It is an absolutely outstanding high-end example, just not quite a PSA 10. Here's a look at a PSA Near Mint to Mint 8. Generally what you see on 8s, again, at arm's length, it looks like a mint card. But when you inspect it further, you will see things like minor touches on corners and maybe a loss of vibrance in the white border of the card if it happens to possess white borders like the 52 Mantle. Here's a PSA 7. Now, most people consider PSA 7s on vintage material to be quote-unquote an investment grade. Now, what separates this 7 from the previous viewed 8? Generally, it's corner wear. So when we enhance the corners here in the upper right, you can see that advancement in wear compared to the slight wear at the tips of the PSA 8. It's still an outstanding card. Let's take a look at this PSA Excellent to Mint 6. Now, when you start to view the 6, you can see even from a distance now some of the defects that you couldn't quite see on the 8 and even the 7. So here, when we enhance the image, you can start to see little surface defects that are showing up in the background of the Mantle card in addition to the advanced corner wear. Here's a PSA 552 Mantle. Now you're starting to see more advancement in loss of eye appeal. Now on this particular card, if we blow up that bottom right corner, you could also see a slight crease or bend in that bottom right, and in addition to other defects on the card, but you can clearly see the downgrade as it relates to eye appeal on this card versus the 6. Here's a PSA 4 52 Topps Mickey Mantle. Again, as we go down the scale, you'll start to pick up more things even from a distance. The corners are starting to lose that square appearance. There's more advanced wear. In addition to that, when we enhance the image of this card, you can start to see the advancement in surface wear and even surface creases. Here's a PSA 3. Now, the thing that'll jump out the most on this card is now the corners are starting to have that rounded appearance. They have lost the squared up appearance, and when we blow up the bottom, you can really see now that the card has now lost that squared up look and the corners have become rounded. Here's a PSA 252 Mantle. Now this card at first glance has actually excellent eye appeal for a PSA 2. Some people don't quite understand that. There is such a thing as a PSA 2 or a PSA 3 as you go down the scale with excellent eye appeal. But due to technical defects such as surface creases, this card results in a PSA 2 grade. So when we enhance this image, you can really start to see those creases that go through the front and back of the card. Finally, we're down to the PSA 1 grade. Here we have signs of severe overall wear. But remember, even though there may be severe wear present, such as creases and surface defects, in order to receive a numerical grade, the integrity of the card must still be intact to receive that PSA number, and that is the case with this 52 Mantle. That's it for the PSA 10 this week. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of the program. See you next time.